So as I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about Master of Orion, some of the pitfalls of bringing back a legendary IP. My name is Keeling. I'm a senior R&D expert at Wargaming, and I'm the director of product vision on the Master of Orion game. I have a master's degree in video game production and design. I worked on games like Panzer Elite, Zoldner, America's Army Operations, America's Army Soldiers, our own Order of War, World of Tanks, other games like that. You've probably heard of us. Wargaming is pretty well known for our free-to-play, mainly online vehicle combat games. World of Tanks, World of Warplanes, World of Warships. What you might not know is that we spent over a dozen years before making these famous games making turn-based strategy titles like Massive Assault, DBA Online, and real-time strategy games like Order of War. So strategy games are really in our DNA. They're part of what we do, part of our passion. So what makes a game legendary? Massive sales, rave reviews, dedicated players, all of the above. So I'm going to take a look at a few of these legendary games, not these in particular, but these are legends, and see how they did. So I'm not talking about games that were remastered. So if you remaster a game and you just send a high-definition version out, that's not really reimagining the game. This has already been done with games like BioShock, Kingdom Hearts, Borderlands, Resident Evil, Homeworld, Ico, and even Bionic Commando. There's no risk here, other than the cost of upgrading the art and the engine versus your expected ROI. You're going to get a certain number of sales that's very predictable. There are no changes to gameplay, and while you won't get many new players, you'll definitely get a cheer from your fans. So this is completely different, reimagining a game. It involves a lot of risk. People will remember the original fondly. They often idealize it, forgetting its bad qualities. Reimagined games, remakes have been made of 1942, Tomb Raider, Myst, Wolfenstein, among others. Even Star Wars Battlefront is a reboot. But how have these games done in the market? And more importantly to us, probably why? So the original games for most of these are too old to actually have a Metacritic score, which is unfortunately what much of the industry goes by right now, even though those scores are pretty fallacious. So the remake, unfortunately for the remake, it is not too old to have a Metacritic score. Numbers aren't available for the new version as far as sales figures, but it's safe to say they weren't very good. The sales figures for the original also include even the coin-operated model. But this game did not do very well in its reboot. In fact, here's what reviewers had to say. The first one is my favorite. Sucks the life and vibrancy from its rich lineage. Not very well done. Now, Tomb Raider, on the other hand, did a great job of retaining its market and predicting sales based not so much on the original game, but on the several games in the series that were released regularly before the reboot. That's the best way to reboot a franchise. You're keeping it fresh for a long time, then you reboot the original while you still have a core audience that's constantly playing your newer versions of the game. Unfortunately, for many games that are being brought back, that's really not an option. Comments for Tomb Raider were usually pretty good. There's some differentiation about whether the story worked well with the presentation, but in general, it got good reviews and the players were happy, which is, of course, the most important thing. And next, we'll take a look at XCOM. Now, UFO Enemy Unknown was the original game. It was also called XCOM UFO Defense. It's, again, too old for the Metacritic scores. But sales, it actually has like 20 times as many sales in the new version as it did in the original. Like Tomb Raider, there were a bunch of other XCOM sequels in between, and that helped to maintain their momentum. So that's another good factor supporting that. And the reviews were also good. So that's also useful, except for this one where it says, old fans may find it too simplified. This is something that we've also found with Master of Orion, where the original game was so complicated that when you try to bring it to a new audience and open it up to more players, the original hardcore fans tend to feel that it's too simplistic. So Myst is kind of interesting. It was rebooted twice, 7 years after launch and then 14 years after that. Of course, it's too old for Metacritic on the original. Whoops, this is an old slide. Okay. The 2000 version was very moderate in success. The original sold about 6 million copies. The new one that came out in 2014 actually had too few reviews to even get a Metacritic score. Maybe the number of sales were maybe in the hundreds. It's not popular. And here's some examples of what people said about it. They're improving slightly on a game that was itself a slight improvement on a game. It's probably a very low mark for most games, and I'm sure the developers weren't shooting for that kind of review. And to hit Castle Wolfenstein next, of course the original Wolfenstein 3D, again too old, but the reimagined game only got a 74. The next sequel, actually, after this, came out in 2014, which was The New Order, and it sold twice as many copies as this one, even though it only had still a Metacritic in the 70s. The next one after that only sold half as many as this version, even with a slightly better Metacritic score, but still in the 70s. So clearly the Metacritic scores themselves and the sales figures don't have a necessary relationship. Legendary games need more than just the name. You actually have to really have passion for it and reboot it in a way that has a new vision. There we go. So yeah, the reviews for Wolfenstein were that it really doesn't do much for the genre. And the last one of these, which will be Star Wars Battlefront. So there's a lot of great hype. There's a lot of great hype, and it's a fantastic IP. I mean, it's the most popular IP in the world. But it was a very mediocre game. The gameplay hasn't advanced at all between the original Star Wars Battlefront and the new one that came out last year. And it also had the advantage of coming out right when the Star Wars 7 was coming out. So with all this hype, it actually had twice as many sales as the original, but it has very poor reviews. And here's a few examples. So it's a kind of a generic game. It's great to look at, but really, like the last review says, style over substance. It's very difficult to bring back a legendary game, and I can tell you, after having worked for almost the last 3 years on Master of Orion, that is a fact. So, the original Master of Orion was published in 1993, there we go, by Microprose in Baltimore, and developed by Simtex in Austin, Texas, by a team of around a dozen people in just 6 months, based on a prototype called Star-Lords. It introduced the original gameplay of explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate, which has become the 4X genre. That term was actually coined for Master of Orion in 1993 by Alan Emmerich. In retrospective reviews, Allgame, GameSpot, and IGN all regard Mu as the standard by which all turn-based strategy games set in space are judged. Master of Orion is a member of GameSpy's Hall of Fame and GameSpot's list of the greatest game of all times. This is definitely a legendary game. It also spawned sequel, Master of Orion 2, which is generally rated much higher than the original game and is more popular among the fans, and a game which we do not speak of, Master of Orion 3, which was Muso. It was garbage. Most of that was problems with relaunching a legendary IP. The same kinds of problems that we ran into. So there are thousands of gamers who, like ourselves, will recognize this game from their childhoods. The challenge is we have to satisfy not only those gamers, those players, and ourselves, but a new generation of gamers who aren't as hardcore. They don't want to manage spreadsheets. They don't want to crunch numbers. They just want to pay for a game, they want to play, and they want to win, and they want to have fun. So what was important to us from the beginning of development was not to repeat the game that we'd played in the 90s, but to repeat that experience for our older selves, who may have not nearly as much time as we used to when we were younger. I can remember weekends at college where I would play Master of Orion 2, and on Monday I was living on pizza and Mountain Dew all weekend, and on Monday I would just sleep all day instead of going to school. I can't do that now, or I would be fired, right? Well, actually, maybe I can play Master of Orion all day at work instead, but that's just a perk of the job. So we had to repeat this experience for our older selves who are busier, who have families, who have jobs, and also for new players who've never heard of Master of Orion. We estimated actually that about 80% of our players we expected would never have heard of the original game. We also wanted a game, and this came directly from the top, from Victor Kisley, our CEO. He wanted to have a game that he could play with his son, and that they could be on the same understanding of what the game was about, and he could share the learning experience that he had from playing Master of Orion 20 years ago with his son. So this was never about the money for us. This was about the experience. This was about the passion of creating a new game. So this is a quote from our forums. It's so obvious. It's even the people who are just playing these classic remakes and fans of the original games can tell. This should also be obvious to developers. Can you guys read that? I hope so. Okay. There's a lot of investment and there's a lot of risk, but there's really not as much value in classic IP as we normally assume. Everyone thinks back to these iconic games, to the good times they had with the games. They remember the games differently, but realistically, the market is very small for these games. So, what do you wind up getting? Pitchforks and torches. We knew going into this we were going to face a lot of players on both ends of the spectrum. Some people would say it was too hard, some would say it was too easy. Some would say it was too fast, some would say it was too slow. Many would say it's too similar to the original game, and many more would also say it's too different from the original game. So we embraced the fact that we knew going in that the community would be very passionate. We started early access, actually, in part to provide a platform for players, so to give us feedback, to grow the community, and we also leveraged countless thousands of man-hours of UX testing and play testing to be sure we could respond effectively to those opinions and actually try to integrate that into the development process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the changes that we actually made in the game. So one of the first things we realized was we couldn't sell you this game again. 256 colors, MIDI music. We might as well be programming it in BASIC and installing it from floppy disks. We couldn't do that. We had to take advantage of the full range of modern technology, or people would think we were idiots. We had to make it look good. It had to sound good. It had to be immersive, and it had to be fun. It had to be deep, challenging, and meaningful. So this is what the screen looks like now. We kept the feel of the legendary game by hiring several consultants from the original games to help us out. That helped us to stay true to the lore, the art, the music, and the design principles of the first Master of Orion. We pored over the original artwork. We examined screenshots, sketches. We worked with these guys until we knew that we had it right, or at least we thought we did. We not only had to be consistent with the original game's vision, we also had to build an internally consistent vision of our own. We expect that, like I said, that more than 2/3, probably closer to 80% of our players would never have played the original game. They may not even have heard of it. So the game had to stand on its own as much as it stood in the shadows of its predecessors. The legendary artwork was great for its day, but we definitely needed to bring it out of its pixelated icon stage as it progressed from black and white to color, and eventually now to voiced animated 3D models that are expected by players of today's games. Our newer versions of the races have a lot more personality and feel more like real opponents. And helping us to deliver on that vision, we leveraged a cast of talented actors that were taken from well-known science fiction TV shows and movies like Star Wars, Star Trek, and Firefly. And believe me, I was pretty excited. I got to direct these guys in Hollywood in the studio, and it was really incredible. So I've talked a bit about the face and the voice of the game, but the soul of the game really is its design, right? Of course. Just as ugly as the old GNN robots, this screen, this makes my head hurt. It's too many numbers. The numbers are too big. The text is too small. There's multipliers and percentages. There's pop-ups. There's charts. I don't even know how I ever played this game like this. I could probably use this information to manage a real space empire, but it wouldn't be any fun. Tackling the user interface to make it approachable and usable, but without losing the ability to find all of those tiny details that we used to love to micromanage, that would be one of our first challenges. So now this screen looks like this. It's easier to understand. Detailed information is actually hidden in tooltips that provide all the mathematical calculations for each piece of data in the game. The numbers are manageable. The proportions are obvious. You can drag and drop. It's very easy to find out where you're going. The player is not overwhelmed by details, but they can get at any of them anytime they want. And for those of us who actually crunch the numbers, that's important. We also decided there was a lot to learn from the 4X games that have been successful over the past 20 years. So for our vision of tech research, we took some cues from the easier to understand and ultimately more usable structure used in games like Civilization. Without limiting ourselves to specific deep technology groups, we were able to spread our techs out a bit more than the original game. And we could allow the player advanced functionality, like being able to search the technology tree, highlight text in specific areas, even choose a distant technology down the tree, and the AI would then path them all the way to that technology in between. So it allowed advanced planning. We still have the depth, though, of hundreds of individual technologies, all from the original game with some actual new ones added, and meaningful choices between the branches and specific technologies that players of the original will remember, but new players will also find approachable because, again, all of this information is accessible. Another thing we had to work on was improving diplomacy and AI, not only by making it more visually interesting, but by making it wider and deeper, providing more ways to interact besides just peace and war. You can see that there's only a few things available, and then you're done in this case. So we have added new kinds of agreements, more trade, chances to gift things to other races or threaten them, responses from the AI that are based on anger or fear, friendship or opportunities, sometimes opportunities to stab you in the back. On top of that, we layered strategies and tendencies that vary each race's actions and give them a kind of a true personality feeling. The new Master of Orion actually has a lot more depth and much better AI than the original game. A lot of players who fondly remember the game may not remember how unbalanced, for example, turn-based combat was, or certain technologies or racial features, traits that were very overbalanced in the game so that everyone wound up using them. So again, also a lot of the numbers are hidden below the surface here to avoid confusion, but they're readily accessible. Another thing that we tried here was to to maintain the integrity of the original game. We brought several members of the original team on board as consultants. So Jeff Johannigman, the original producer, Jeff D, the original art director, David Govett, who composed the original music, and he also composed all the music for our game as well, based on his original composition. Alan Emmerich and Tom Hughes at the end wrote the strategy guide for the original. If you remember the original, it was a big purple book. And they also advised on design on Master of Orion 2 and 3. So clearly, Master of Orion Conquer the Stars, the new game, hasn't performed as well as we'd hoped. But we know some of the reasons why. And it's only been about 3 weeks since we launched, so nothing is set in stone yet. But the scores of the later 2 games in the series, we probably actually, given the 84 and the 64, the first one was probably about a 74, which is right where we're at with our new one. But this isn't as high as we'd like. I mean, your scores are never as high as you'd like, right? But how did this happen? What are the things that that we're here for, right? To learn how this affects rebooting a legendary IP. And if you're thinking about doing this, you might want to think twice. So it turns out that 2016 is a great year for 4X strategy game players. There's a lot of competition out there right now. The announcement of Civilization VI was a huge surprise for us. Its popularity vastly overshadows any other 4X game. Stellaris announced their early access would start on the day we launched Master of Orion. I'm sure that was unintentional. No way. Also, no doubt accidental, not really, were Steam sales on the same day we launched. By Stardock, including Galactic Civilization 3, Sins of a Solar Empire, and Offworld Trading Company, and by Paradox Interactive, who had Stellaris on sale on our opening weekend. So everyone else is taking advantage of your legendary IP to launch their own clones or have sales on their own clones and kind of undermine your ability to sell to your audience. So while we all watch out for the expected competition, keep in mind that unexpected announcements and underhanded platform sales may affect your ability to reach your audience. So early access is great, but there's a couple of things to remember if you're relaunching an old IP. Ooh, there we go. First, be feature complete when you go into early access. We were not feature complete in early access. We spent a lot of our time in early access finishing features that we already knew were going to be in the game. This actually compromised our ability to accept feedback from the community and deliver based on the community feedback, which looked like we weren't listening. This is your real launch. Early access doesn't matter. Nobody cares what it's called. The players are not afraid to evaluate your game in early access as if it were a real launch. This is your true launch. Doesn't matter when you come out of early access. Only hardcore fans are going to buy immediately. Only a few % of those people, like all players everywhere, will actually participate in your community. So these are the most hardcore of all of them, and 80%, just like in any other forum, will come there just to complain. This can lead to a very negative community if you don't manage it carefully. We actually did that very well, in spite of the trolls. So this leads me to trolls. So if you reboot a legend, you will have lots of trolls. All of these comments come from negative Steam reviews. Each one says the opposite of the one before it. This is what players are saying. So I actually compare this a bit to Star Wars 7. J.J. Abrams delivered a Star Wars movie, a reboot of a legendary IP. On one side, he had critics saying the movie was way too much like the original Star Wars. It was set on the desert planet. He had the same kinds of space battles, same looking stormtroopers. And on the other end, he had critics saying it was way too different from the original Star Wars. It had different kinds of characters. It had different kinds of storylines, and yet 80% of the people who are watching the movie were in the middle, just enjoying the movie, not criticizing. So this is the kind of thing that we have with the Master of Orion. Each of these hardcore fans it will let you know exactly what feature was the most important in the original game and must not be changed, while they'll also explain what features must be changed, and every troll will disagree with every other troll. So they're all arguing on our community forums. Their passion is exciting. It drives us to work harder, but it can be frustrating if you take it personally, or if you actually try to make all of their changes without evaluating the potential results. It can also put off players who are new to the franchise, who may come to the forums looking for some helpful advice. We even had one troll who messaged as many developers as he could on Twitter and on Facebook, spammed our forums on Steam and our website, emailed everyone he could find at Wargaming, and even wrote a handwritten physical letter to our CEO demanding all the changes he wanted to be made in the game, and telling the CEO that he should fire everyone if they didn't do it. We haven't had any death threats yet, so that's good at least. So with trolls, all you can do is grit your teeth and look for the useful criticism in their comments without getting sucked into any debates. Then we go to reviewers, which are also kind of trolls. You never know what reviewers are going to say, no matter what they say when they're interviewing you, and there are definitely problems with the way games are reviewed. Many websites create harsh reviews to appeal to the critical gamer. Others play nice to curry favor with the publishers. Worse, the system of giving out reviews is mainly an editor who asks his staff, hey, who wants this game? Who wants Master of Orion? So what happened? Master of Orion got reviewers who were either hardcore fans of the original game, and they expected a clone of the original with just nicer graphics, or they got fans of modern 4X space games, like Stellaris and Galactic Civilizations, who never played the original Master of Orion and expected it to be more like the newer games. Both groups are critical of the game for different reasons. Whenever we got a reviewer who had never played a 4X game except maybe Civilization, we got excellent reviews. And even the ones that were hardcore often said, this game would be great for new players who are coming into the 4X space game genre. And this is our intended audience. The market, the entire market of 4X space strategy gamers is very small. We knew that that was not going to be enough to actually pay for a game. We had to open up the market. It's very difficult though. So I would recommend, if you actually have to do this, mention to the editors when you're giving them the game for review, tell them who your audience is. Tell them, hey, this is for new gamers, so this is not a hardcore game. That way they know they should be reviewing it that way. They still may not do it, but at least you've given it some effort. So here's what some of our reviewers have had to say about Master of Orion. It looks like we hit our mark. We were appealing to a wider audience, especially new players, but the reviewers who looked at other more complicated 4X games out there didn't seem to think that that was very important in their scoring or their evaluations. So we've actually learned quite a lot from this process. Bringing back some of the core team on a famous IP, for example, it really helps grow your perspective and reduces worries about the fan base. But by itself, that won't solve your problems. A lot of the hardcore players don't care what the original developers think about the game. For example, we made some changes to the original core gameplay mechanics and added star lanes, which restricted travel, and we changed the turn-based battles that were very slow and unbalanced into faster, more beautiful-looking real-time battles. This was because the original developers said if they had the time and the resources, they would have done it that way. So we did it that way. The players don't necessarily want that. We've also learned to start involving the community as early as possible and do it gradually, not all at once. It's much harder to manage community expectations with a respected franchise than when you're creating a brand new IP, because everyone comes in with their own expectations and you have to deal with those. If you have a new IP, the hard part is getting the word out, but everyone wants to know about your IP. They're not telling you about your IP. We also learned to respect the original while we were bringing up to modern standards for quality, aesthetics, interface, and so forth. Another thing too is to be open to change. So if you're going to ask for advice from people, use it, or at least tell them why you're not using it. Otherwise, don't ask them. They will troll you. Get some information to back up or contradict your hunches. Play tests, usability tests, very important. Performance and balance data from inside the game, very useful for making good decisions about game features. For example, we gathered data of which races won, which victory conditions won the most. So we could determine if there was overpowered or underpowered races, or if there were victory conditions that were too easy or too difficult to get, and balance those during early access. 2 minutes maybe. So not every feature is going to work out right the first time either. So cut a feature, move on if you have to, come back later if you have the resources. But remember, there's always a lot more game than you have people to make it. There's not enough time in the day. So we still have features that were actually cut during early access that we've promised to the community will be returned to the game, but we haven't finished rebalancing them. But we're going to put them back in, but this is going to take even more time. And finally, working with your platform, your delivery systems. So this is the first time that, as a publisher, we worked with Steam and with Good Old Games. And we spent a lot of time working with them to determine the best times for launches and announcements, best practices for launch day, and how to leverage all the things that they have to offer. This is our first simultaneous launch on these platforms, not to mention multiple operating systems, 3 operating systems, 11 languages. The complexity of these interactions taught us a lot about where to focus our efforts, which is on core gameplay. So we accomplished a lot of things. Like I said, even though we had strategy games in our core DNA, we've been known for the last half a dozen years for these action games that are free-to-play combat games. So this is the first time that, as a grown, mature, large global company, that we actually shipped our first third-party developed game, our first strategy game, and so forth. All of these things are firsts for this company, and we've learned a lot from these the process that we went through. We made a game that's a lot of fun. It's a great entry for new players into the 4X space strategy genre. It's a game that we can play with our kids. Is it a timeless classic? Is it a legendary game? You'll have to ask me in a couple years, because right now, like I said, we're 3 weeks after launch, so it's still pretty new. So that's all I have. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Would you do early access again, or would you do it differently, or would you just not do it?
It depends on the game. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
Softball. By the way, I have your power supply back here for your laptop. So yes, if we were going to do this again with early access, we would go in feature complete. We started out with a 3-month estimate for early access, which wasn't even enough time to actually integrate community feedback. So we would have a minimum of 6 months up to 12 expectation for early access instead of 3 months and then having to scramble to extend it to 6. So I would definitely want to do it again, but maybe not if I'm rebooting an IP. I think rebooting an IP, I would rather use a closed beta for that by pulling hardcore players out of the websites like Explorminate and Space Sector that focus on these kinds of games, and doing closed beta tests with them, and then just doing, for new player testing, just doing play tests at facilities that run play tests and UX tests to get the new player feedback on that. So I probably would not do it for a legendary IP, just for like new IP where you're informing the players rather than trying to get their opinion.
Hey, thank you so much. This has been really eye-opening so far. One of the nightmare scenarios that I look at as a creative director is being asked. I work in free-to-play or we're branching into mobile right now. Is being said, hey, we've got this amazing IP from this classic PC game. We want to make a free-to-play mobile game out of it in a totally different genre, which is sort of all the challenges that you've had so far, plus about 10 million more of them. Is there any universe where you can actually see that working? Or do you get sort of a free pass when players see something on mobile, they say, okay, well, I'm going to expect a different experience on mobile, and they're more open to it? What do you think?
So we got a lot of players at the beginning. Well, not players, I mean the community before the game even came out. complaining that Wargaming owned the IP. They're like, oh great, Master of Orion, it's not going to be a traditional strategy game, it's going to be a free-to-play, microtransaction, money-grabbing kind of game with a, you know, online action game or something like that. And we went through great pains to say, no, it's going to be, you buy it once, you play it forever, this is a traditional style game, and you know, we wanted to capture that audience. There are a lot of things that I would love to do with this IP. I think the fact that we have you know, a dozen alien races that are all different lends itself well to like a shooter, like for example, like an Overwatch style game, or we could do a different kind of strategy game with it, or even something like an MMORPG, like you know, if I wanted to spend $150 million or something, you know, make like a World of Warcraft style game, because it's got a deep, rich universe. But as a first game, rebooting the IP, no way. The audience will kill you. If you go, unless you strictly are going for a totally new market and ignoring that segment, like if you look and you go, okay, there's, you know, we'll get 50,000 players if we do the old IP style game, and we get 1 million otherwise, just go with the 1 million, and who cares what those 50,000 people think. But I mean, for practical reasons. But if you can reboot the franchise and show that you understand the passion behind that franchise, you can bring that hardcore audience into your game, and then next time you have a game, you'll just build your IP even bigger. So it's one of those decisions that's really based on the IP and what your goals are for it, I would say.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris. There is a question I brought from home from first time I saw your new Master of Orion. It's changing to RTS
battles
fight.
Yeah.
Yes. Because the most of passion for the original game was managing the tactical fights. And I asked myself, and I ask you now, why changing this? It was an important decision. You know, I thought, first my thought was you wanted faster pace of the game, because it's there's a big problem that games takes a long time to play.
Yes.
And if you got 6 players online and you have to play 6 hours, somebody will go eat pizza, somebody will go sleep, somebody will go for his job, something will happen, and somebody will leave, because there's second important problem with this. How do you address that problem? And you know, fans waiting you at mobile with this new interface. It's just asking you to get mobile.
And actually, I would say that depending on how the game continues to sell over the rest of the year, I mean, mobile or console could be an option, but we'd have to really sell a lot of copies. So go and buy a couple thousand or something. But for the real-time battles, that was actually, like I said, suggested by the original developers of the first Master of Orion. They only did turn-based because it was so much easier to program. And it turned out that it's very unbalanced to play turn-based battles. There's a big advantage to the first mover, to the first shooter. There's also a lot of ways that you can actually, it's not realistic when you're, could you imagine watching like Star Wars, where you see like Luke Skywalker goes like a little ways in the trench, stops, thinks for a few minutes, moves a little farther, I'm gonna think for a few minutes more, oh, there's my dad behind me trying to shoot me with his TIE fighter, what do I do? I'm gonna sit here for a few minutes and think about it. It just doesn't work really. Space battles should be very fast and very exciting. So it also, again, it's like you said, it speeds up the game, makes it more approachable for new players, and it's a more aesthetically pleasing environment. We do have pause in there, so if you like turn-based action, you know, you can watch it for a few seconds, hit pause, give new orders, watch it for another minute, pause it, give new orders. So you can actually kind of play like that. But we're still improving that interface actually, so expect more. We're still, we just launched, so we're still patching the game and we're getting more feedback. So. Thank you.